pull off an upset like this, to beat a top 15 team like Kansas State, you got to force turnovers.
The opportunity to score points, score touchdowns, and they have an opportunity now to do that.
Mizzou's defense could give them a lot of problems. That's something that could turn the tide for Mizzou.
And you need to be able to take the top off the defense and get that ball down the field.
I think they pull off the upset on Saturday. I'm picking Missouri. I'm putting the style point shades back on. Tigers on a last-second Harrison Mevis field goal defeats Kansas State. And welcome back into the Tiger Kickoff Show, presented by the Columbia Missourian. I am your host, Harrison Vapnek from KOMU Sports, joined alongside the beat writers of the MU football team, Wendell, Adam, Brandon. Wow, what a weekend, guys.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
What a weekend indeed.
Pretty cool, I think it's an understatement. I don't think you're selling it short at this point.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, that was, in all honesty, I think that was one of the coolest football games I've ever gotten to watch in person. And maybe like one of the best games I've ever watched, period. So
there may not be a better sight from that press box of watching all the students storm onto the field and huddle together. It was just something that you always dreamed about kind of covering as a reporter, but you actually got to see it, so it was something really cool.
It was like unbelievable rush of emotions. And I was like recording and I had like my hand on my head. I was just like in complete shock. And then, yeah, it was a
pretty sick experience. You could say it was a sicker experience. This is our front page of the Missourian this week with the hero of the game, Harrison Mevis. The two Harrisons right here, Harrison Vapnek, Harrison Mevis. You know, it's a good week for all of us, especially number 92 for the Tigers, who kicked the game-winning 61-yard field goal as time expired to defeat Kansas State 30-27. It was the longest kick in SEC history. There was pandemonium all on the field. The Storm, Eli Drinkwitz, is now 3-0 for the first time in his Missouri tenure. It's his second 3-game winning streak as the head coach here in Columbia. What are just our raw reactions to the win, the game, just anything out of what happened on Saturday?
We talked last week about like what this win could mean just for the program, and they went out and did that. I think I don't think there are program-changing wins, but I think that this is a huge just indicator of a culture shift. I think it's going to be huge just for confidence going forward. This is just a great win all the way around.
And we mentioned on last week's show that Eli Drinkwitz was lacking the big win in Missouri. He had the LSU one in 2020, but that was a weird one. They had South Carolina last year on the road, which technically was a top 25 win, but they didn't have anything like this. And the fact to come from behind in that back and forth game to eventually pull it out, I think just says a lot about the resiliency of the team and the direction that the program is heading in. Adam, I'll turn to you. What were kind of your raw reactions from Saturday?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, especially in that fourth quarter, was that this defense is legit. They held K-State to 3 points in the final quarter. Mizzou scored 13. Wouldn't have been able to do that if they didn't. If the defense didn't come out with back-to-back stops on the first two drives of the fourth quarter. I believe it was 4 total drives, and then even in the red zone, when K-State hit the game-tying field goal, Chris Abrams-Drain, he had the interception earlier in the game. I did call that he was going to have that first turnover for the Tigers, so that was pretty cool. But he had one of the best pass breakups I've seen him make in the back corner of the end zone, and if he doesn't make that, I don't know if Missouri wins that game.
And there's a couple red zone stands that ended up winning the game. They had the one fluke touchdown on the carom that ended out in the hands, I think it was Brooks, in that first half. But then the red zone defense really stood up after that. Brandon, I'll turn to you. Harrison Mevis, it has been an up and down start, a couple missed extra points, missed field goal, missed one earlier in the game from 55 yards out?
Yeah, 55.
And just comes out and boots a 61-yarder like it's nothing as time expired. What was your reaction when you saw that ball go through those goalposts?
I think it was a little bit of shock, but at the same time, I think when you watch Harrison Mevis play and the way he goes about his kicking, I think he took a lot from that missed kick. And had he not had that missed 54, 55-yarder, I do not believe he would have made the other one. I think he took a lot from that experience that he was able to apply to it. And one of the things that we kind of noticed about him post-game is obviously Mevis all chill and collected. He was asked what he ate for breakfast. He replies, a half plate of eggs, but he also said right before the kick he had some applesauce. So maybe a little bit of that helps him out.
So you're saying that now during the show we have to start eating applesauce 'cause that'll give us good luck for these shows.
Maybe.
That's like Missouri's rallying cry is now going to be eating applesauce for big games and big plays. Speaking of big games, Brady Cook.
Amazing performance.
What a game. 356 yards through the air, 2 passing touchdown, 1 rushing touchdown, led the Tigers on their last drive to set up the Mevis game-winning kick. Brady Cook has gotten a lot of criticism since taking over as a starter at the beginning of last season. It's been a lot of ups and downs, probably more downs than ups, but this feels like the peak of the Brady Cook experience, what we saw on Saturday. Wendell, I'll turn to you. Drinkwitz talked a little bit after the game about the boos beforehand from the crowd and all that. Where do you stand on Cook right now?
Yeah, I mean, Cook was booed in every game. He was booed when his name was called during the starter announcements before the game, early on in the first quarter. And I think he shut him up. I mean, there were plenty of fans that were walking back takes on Twitter. I think he deserves support. He had a great performance. He is the reason that Mizzou has stayed in every game this season. I think you can argue outside of obviously Mevis' heroics, he is a very large part of the win over K-State. He was made every play. He was asked to keep plays alive, made great throws that we haven't seen him make before. So yeah, I mean, there's no doubt really that he's the starter and leader of this team.
It looked like he was playing with a lot of confidence too, especially after the first long touchdown to Bird. And I feel like after that, it was just rolling. He had the deep pass to Marquise Johnson in the second half, and then the one to Norfleet also. It just feels like downfield passing was something that we haven't seen before. And the play calling, I think, had a big part of that. Adam, you talked last week about the ability for Cook in big games to really step up, and he kind of did that on Saturday. What did you see from him?
Yeah, one thing that I thought was pretty poetic, talking about the boos, is that yes, he got booed when they were the starting lineup was being introduced, but when he suffered the knee sprain on the last drive of the first half, he came off the field and it kind of felt like the air was taken out of the stadium.
Yeah.
And right as he got back on, he came back onto a standing ovation. So I think that just kind of shows how well he played in the first half. And the fact that he was able to do it in the second half as well, I think that was the biggest part where I was kind of like, okay, I can see Brady Cook leading this team to compete in the SEC. I said last week that I didn't know if he was going to be the quarterback that can win them big games. He's done it 2 games in a row now, in their 2 biggest games, Arkansas and now South Carolina too, I guess, and at home for the first time in K-State. So I think that he really just proved something to fans. And especially with the play calling, letting him throw the ball deep downfield more, I think that really helped him out and his confidence out. And I think the play that showed it the most was the tight window throw to Theo Weiss, where he put it right over the defender's shoulder, and it was just one of the easiest catches I've ever seen on a contested catch.
It was a very difficult throw, too, on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was one place that he could have put the football, and I think that the placement of that ball, that kind of encaptured Brady Cook's performance to me.
Yeah, there were a lot of instances of that. I got a text from Brandon Haynes on Saturday that he had a statement about Brady Cook he wanted to share. Brandon Haynes, you officially have the floor.
I do believe that QB1 conversation's over. So all the Sam Horn believers, stuff like that, I would stop. I think it's over. Obviously, it's one performance, but I've been somebody who's kind of advocated a little bit for Brady Cook in this, and the fact that he has the best ability to lead Mizzou to a victory. I think there's something about Brady Cook that really stood out to me. It was his ability to just stay on the field and give everything he has. He had every reason to step off that field on Saturday once he got that sprained knee. He did not need to come back in. He could have let Sam Horn take the reins. He could have just sat back. He got booed earlier in the game. He had every reason to sit down and give up. But he came back, and he led Mizzou to a victory. Yes, Harrison Mevis had a huge part in that. But to be fair, Brady Cook put together all the pieces he needed to get them a victory. Everybody questioned his arm strength. He answered those questions. Everybody just kind of had questions about how he would play against a tougher opponent. He responded to that. I just think it's time to maybe quiet the concerns on Brady Cook and just start to believe in him and offer the trust. Because I think Drinkwitz made a good point after the game where you don't be your starting quarterback. I don't think it was a good representation of Mizzou fans for like other campuses and everything like that they go and look and they see Mizzou beat a top 15 team and all they see is fans are booing and their coach has to address it after the game. And so I just think as far as the aesthetics and everything like that, Brady Cook played his butt off and he kind of deserves a little bit of respect, especially heading back into St. Louis and where he has a chance to kind of keep solidifying himself and just continue to build off the performance.
Yeah, and I think that was one of those powerful things that Drinkwitz has ever said at a press conference, that he completely went off his track. I don't even know what the question was originally, but he went off topic and started talking about, we have to be behind our starting quarterback. And I think that next week when he returns to his hometown of St. Louis, I think that'll be the loudest ovation that Brady Cook has ever gotten at one of his own football games. Let's talk about the receivers. Luther Burden continues to get better and better. It doesn't even seem like it's possible. 3 straight big games from him. 7 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. Really had a game-changing play at the start of the fourth quarter. King Luther continues to deliver.
Yeah, I brought up a stat to you before we started recording. He's likely 1 catch away from surpassing his yardage total from last season. Last season, he had 329 yards. Right now, he's at 327. He's just unbelievable. It looks like he's like the kid in recess who's like way more athletic than everyone else, and is just able to run around everyone. Except he's playing Power 5 football.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. He's everyone's saying he's him, and he is. He's just a go starter for
Did you see the clip of him talking to the Kansas State players running off the field?
Yeah, I heard a lot of interesting comments about what was maybe said during the game and by fans, but yeah, he was fired up, and I know people questioned after last year, like, is he really going to want to stay here? Did he just come for the NIL money? He's obviously bought.
It's his house.
Yeah,
he said it himself.
Yeah, he's obviously bought in here. He's been showered with love since he came here on a visit in 2021. I think he's here to stay, and he's going to be great.
Yep, top 3 receiver in the SEC. Malik Neighbors, Evan Stewart, and Luther Burden. Like, super confident in those 3. We talked a lot about play calling last week, Adam.
Yep.
We said the other receivers had to get involved. There were 3 catches against Middle Tennessee by guys not named Luther Burden. Theo Weiss had 6. Mookie Cooper had 4 for 79. Even Marquise Johnson got involved.
Yeah.
The play calling, it was like a brand new playbook, a whole new world for the offense, and it made all the difference. What did you see from that vantage point?
I saw not only was the play calling more designed for the team as a whole, but the play designs were fantastic to me. I thought that the coming out and running Brady Cook on quarterback design runs in the opening drive, and then getting the defensive backs, because they're in that 3-3-5 that we talked about. So you got to get the defensive backs to start coming down a little bit. They do that in the opening drive, take the top off, hit Burden for the 47-yard touchdown. And most of that is because the defensive backs knew that they had to come down and help on the quarterback run, or Missouri had the numbers for the running game. So I thought that was beautiful. On the Brady Cook touchdown run, it was a fake reverse to Burden, and both players that would have had a chance to tackle Brady Cook coming from the backside, both stopped for Burden. So not only are they getting the ball to Burden still, are they getting their receivers more involved, but they know that they have this generational talent in Luther Burden, and they're using him as a decoy to get other people open and create opportunities for different players on their team. I think that was the best offensively called game I've seen from Missouri in a very long time. And, Drinkwitz said that they weren't hiding anything in the playbook. That was a completely different playbook from what we saw the first 2 weeks.
Drinkwitz was playing his poker face.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't showing anything. I know we're all living on our highs right now, Brandon. We're all celebrating the offense and how great it's been. What are some ways that they can improve going forward? Because they haven't won the national championship quite yet. As great as we all feel right now, and as much celebrating that's been done over the last 36, 48 hours, what are some ways, especially on offense, that they can take a step further and continue the success?
I think, first of all, it's remaining consistent. You got to do it week in, week out. And that's a tough ask always, but coming up against Memphis, you can't let yourself get into a lull offensively. You got to come out, start strong. I think one thing we saw that really stood out was Mizzou's ability to respond to that opening Kansas State touchdown. And they hadn't done that in the first couple games. They had just stalled on their first drive. So starting strong and just remaining consistent throughout the game is something that's very big. We kind of saw that a little bit fall apart once Brady Cook got injured. In that third quarter, we didn't see much offensively at all, but they were able to kind of get themselves back into a rhythm. And I think we just need to see that rhythm continue as it kind of goes forward and just kind of build off of it going into the week's future.
Real fast, let's turn over to the defense, who had despite 27 points given up, a pretty strong performance. We talked last week about putting pressure on Will Howard. Will Howard looked banged up for a lot of that game, and I think Missouri kind of took advantage of them keeping him in the game. We also saw some of their backup Avery Johnson in some Wildcat formations. Wendell, talk about the pressure that they were able to force on the Kansas State quarterbacks.
Yeah, they look good. 3 sacks. He was constantly under pressure. The unlucky touchdown that they had in the first half, he was under pressure then. The ball was tipped by Carlisle, unfortunately fell in the hands of Phillip Brooks. They forced the interception. That was because of pressure too. Tyron Hopper was right in his face. Surprisingly, didn't get a hand on it, but it worked out anyway. I think the defensive line, we knew they were going to test the offensive line with the injuries that they had, and they did that. I do think there are a couple things that weren't perfect. They weren't great on getting off the field. We talked about that last week about getting off the field on third down. I believe Kansas State was 8 for 17, which isn't too bad.
Yeah, like
but
45%.
That's for about 47% on third down. They did score every time they were in the red zone, or scored touchdowns. They were 3 for 3. So I think those are some things you got to work on moving forward. Kansas State's a good team, and they did enough to get the win. But yeah.
You wrote a lot about Chris Abrams-Drain last week, Adam, and he came out and had the first forced turnover of the season. Evaluate his performance specifically, because he matched up against Kansas State's good receivers in Garcia and Brooks. Yeah,
I think that he and Hopper, I think, were the two most outstanding players on the defense, in my opinion, from the K-State game. And we got to talk to Drinkwitz, obviously, in the presser after the game, and he said the same thing. He said he's not surprised that those are the two guys that are consistently making plays for them. They do it week in, week out. And he said that he hates going up against them in practice because they're doing it in practice too. But yeah, I think that the coverage was a lot better than it was against Middle Tennessee. I did think that there were times against Middle Tennessee where receivers were getting open on busted coverage, but I think that it was more consistently blanketed coverage across the field. Ennis Rakestraw did a great job in coverage. Obviously, Chris Abrams-Drain did a good job in coverage. Travis Johnson did a great job in coverage as well. I mean, there were just so many people that did their role better than they did in the first 2 weeks. And I think that is the best sign of improvement for a defense that wants to be one of the best in the nation. And then the one thing that I do want to hit on is, like Wendell said, the money downs were terrible. Again, even for Mizzou's offense, they were 3 for 13, I believe. Something along those lines. Yeah. But the 3 for 3 in the red zone for K-State, all 3 of their touchdowns also came on third down. So if they really want to take their defense to the next level, they need to be better on those money downs and force field goals or just force turnovers, either one.
Yeah, that's going to be a big thing going forward. And Sinnott, the tight end, kept getting open.
Yeah.
It was very frustrating he kept finding those gaps. But I feel like twice late in the game, on third downs, they got the stop they needed to. When they had a 3rd and short, they tried getting Sinnott out in the flat, and that pass was broken up. And then I think the 3rd and 15 on the last drive that Kansas State had, Missouri was able to get off the field. Yep. So it feels like when they absolutely needed to, they were able to take advantage and get those stops. So credit to them. We'll wrap up with more on that defense, Brandon. Last year they were destroyed on the running game by Deuce Vaughn and company. I thought they were pretty solid in not letting Kansas State break off some big runs. What was the key to the success from Mizzou's run defense?
I just think it's the defensive line. I mean, we've talked about it. They've got several guys who they can just swap in and come in and make a difference. I mean, you got Darius Robinson, you got Johnny Walker, and just those guys' continued emergence at the edge position. I just think those are the type of guys that you can kind of build around and continue to excel. Another thing that I wanted to highlight on with the defense in particular, and we talked about it a little bit with Drinkwitz after the game, was their depth. We saw some guys leave the game, and this comes on offensively too, but specifically on defense. We saw some guys leave the game. We saw Rakestraw leave the game for a little bit, so we saw Marcus Clark came in and everything like that. So those guys that came in were able to kind of step in and make a difference. Travis Johnson, obviously, also there. He starts a lot too, but just kind of mixing in there. It's just kind of cool to see that depth and that continued improvement from the secondary guys that just kind of make an overall complete team defensively.
We'll now turn to our moments of the game from our video from our friends over at KOMU Sports, breaking down our 3 best moments of the game, and we'll start with the first touchdown of the game from Luther Bird in the 3rd. Adam, what happened on this play that led to a wide open touchdown for number 3?
Yeah, so they got a little play action to start here. It kind of brings, you can see the linebackers get brought in a little bit. Luther Burden, he's going to run a little skinny post here. Down the seam, he said he saw the safety come up, and the ball has to go to him there. Brady Cook steps up, throws it to him, hits him absolutely in stride, and that's, Big touchdown for the Tigers to respond on the opening drive.
And a fun celebration there, too. That wasn't Luther Burden's only touchdown of the game. Wendell, he had a big one in the fourth quarter to really swing the game and put Missouri back on top. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, this was a great play here from Cook. He was under pressure. This ball was not meant to go to Luther, but that was his safety option there. Luther breaks a tackle. Great downfield block from Tyler Stevens. Easy money for Burden into the end zone. Second of the day. Great play there.
Yeah, and then last but not least, I think everyone knows what this last play is going to be. Brandon Haynes, take us away.
Harrison and the field goal unit have kind of struggled to get consistency, but they've had a perfect placement there. Mevis had just enough leg to get it over that crossbar, and absolute pandemonium ensues. You see all the phones out, the fans running into the crowd. Players going.
Let's watch this for a second. Look at the fans. This is just absolute chaos. This is our friend Luca Vitelli filming this. He just went straight onto the field and among all the fans, the refs trying to get out of the way here, and everyone just ran on the field and didn't know what to do. You mentioned you saw Mevis go to the end zone. Players running all over. It's just what a great moment for college football. What a great moment for this program. And
in the midst of all of this, there was a flag on the field.
Number 8's on the field. I think we're the only two people in the whole stadium who saw that. And we'll take the win what we can get. I don't know about moment of the game. That could be the moment of the season, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
And depending how the season goes, unless we're in the national championship in January, which would be pretty sweet. Those were our moments of the game. Thank you, KOMU Sports, for all the video content. We'll be back later this week to preview Missouri and Memphis ahead of their game in St. Louis next Saturday. We will also have a special snack, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Harrison Vapnek. We'll see you later this week on the Tiger Kickoff Show.